Hey folks, this week's our topic is looking at the specialized personnel at our crime scenes. Alright, so the name of the game here as it relates to crime scene work is teamwork. That really, you might have your uniformed officers who are first responders, you might have detectives, you might have CSIs, you might have all these different people showing up at your crime scenes, even the FBI, DEA, it doesn't matter. The thing is, every person has some level of importance, so there's not one of us who is more important than somebody else when it comes to our crime scenes. Alright, so some of the specialized positions we would have potentially, say, our detective or investigator. Every agency uses a different terminology. It doesn't matter what term you use. And, every agency kind of uses their detectives differently. So for a basic point of understanding, a detective is basically your case manager. They're somebody who will respond out to the crime scene after there's been some determination that this is more than the patrol officers can take care of. They might not come directly to the crime scene. They might go to the hospital to deal with the victim first. Any number of different things happen. But upon their arrival at the crime scene, usually they're given a walkthrough of the crime scene and, they're given an outline of what's going on. They may help with collecting of the evidence. They may not. So it just kind of depends. But the detective is the overall person responsible for making sure that the investigation goes from point A to point B to point C to point D, etc., etc., etc. Then we have our CSIs. Now again, the CSIs could be the detectives. It could be that first responding patrol officer because they have evidence technician duties. It could be a civilian. It doesn't matter who they are. They're the folks responsible for putting the evidence in a bag and sealing the bag. And there are some specialties within the world of CSI, but for the most part, we're thinking about somebody who is an evidence technician. Now, some of those specialized skills. Again, this could be a CSI wearing multiple hats. This could be somebody you're bringing in specially just for this crime scene. But we have our identification officers, otherwise known as ID officers. They specialize in latent fingerprints. So while everybody who does evidence collection should understand fingerprints, ID officers have a little better understanding of them. They also have some photographic skills to be able to collect the fingerprints via photography before the dusting and lifting. Forensic surveyors, they will come out to our scenes with special survey equipment and help us generate really good diagrams of the crime scene using CAD, computer-aided drawing software. Forensic photographers, going beyond just fingerprint photography, taking photography to the next level. Low-light photography, aerial photography. With infrared and ultraviolet photography, we can make evidence that is otherwise hard to see show up. So here we can see a footprint in dust on a chair, and the pattern of the chair makes it hard to see. And using some different photographic techniques, we can pop that back out. Might be our crime lab personnel. From time to time, we require the crime lab to come to our crime scenes and help us out. So they have usually training in chemistry and biology, and they have a better understanding of the scientific standards. And so by them coming to our crime scenes, they can better assess the evidence that has scientific value versus evidence that is just tertiary, that you might still want to collect it, but this is the stuff the lab needs to be analyzing right away. At death scenes, we're going to have the medical examiner or coroner show up. Typically here in Wisconsin, it's going to be the coroner showing up. The medical examiner is a medical doctor who works for the state and does autopsies. The coroners work for the counties. They are elective. Typically with the coroner, their job is going to be identifying the body and taking responsibility for the body until the family takes custody of it for a funeral. The medical examiner is the pathologist who does the actual autopsy at some controlled lab location, not at the crime scene. When we deal with sexual assaults, we have our forensic nurses, typically referred to as SANE nurses, Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner, acronym SANE. And our SANE nurses have specialized training not only in the field of nursing, but also in the field of evidence collection. So when we go to the ER and we deal with a SANE nurse, they know how to collect our sexual assault evidence kits, and they also know how to maintain that chain of custody of the evidence. From time to time, we might have to identify bite marks, or we might have to identify human bodies based on their dental records. So we bring in a forensic dentist or forensic orthodontist. Their technical term is forensic odontologist. So when we have large mass disasters, again, thinking about DNA evidence, not everybody's in our DNA databases. DNA costs a lot of money. Dental x-rays are very easy. If we have remains, we wonder who is who. We simply x-ray the bodies and we get the records of the missing persons or the persons who were supposed to be on that plane during a plane crash. From time to time we have bites. Bite mark evidence is something that we use in court. But I'm going to warn you right off the bat, there is a little bit of guesstimation and interpretation used in bite mark evidence. And so there's a lot of folks who don't really enjoy or don't really find a lot of scientific value in the bite marks because there's a lot of factors that play into those. Forensic anthropologists are folks, if you watch the show Bones, you might be somewhat familiar with. They will come out to crime scenes when we have burials or we have folks, we call them scattered remains. If somebody has been killed or died outside and scavengers have began to scatter the remains and we need to start finding the remains across an open field. So they'll come out and help us dig up the remains, help us search for remains, and start evaluating the skeleton to make sure that we have all the parts of the body for a proper autopsy. Likewise, how do we find some of these remains? How do we find these clandestine graves? How do we find stuff that's been surface scattered? Our cadaver dogs, dogs that are specially trained to sense human decay through their smell. We smell different when we decay than other animals. You might say, well, you know, I've been out in the woods after, you know, hunting season and I've smelled decaying animals. You know, how dogs know the difference? There is some subtle differences between decaying human and decaying deer and decaying bear that they can find us. We also have, you know, disasters. Here we've got some building collapse, search and rescue operation going on post-earthquake where the dogs are able to go in and find the remains so we can get them out before we, you know, throw all the stuff from the building collapse out. From time to time when we deal with serial criminals or we have a crime spree going on that we suspect the same person's committing multiple crimes, we can bring in our forensic psychologists and they will do the criminal profiling. Now, reality check, folks, what you see on some of the TV shows like Profiler, that is not exactly what we do in the world of forensic psychology. As a matter of fact, the number of forensic psychologists out there in the world is pretty minimal. There's not a lot of demand for this job. Some of our TV shows make it look like there are quite a few of them out there and every police department has one. The reality is there are just a few dozen of them out there. Most of them work for the federal FBI agencies. And yeah, we need them only for very big serial killer cases. And as you know, there's not a lot of serial killers out there. Forensic engineers, kind of going in a different path here. When we have a structural collapse, when we have stuff with some of our car crashes, from time to time, a forensic engineer might be called in to evaluate the structural integrity of the building, the structural integrity of a bridge. We've got a couple bridge collapse photos here. Heck, just right in the news this weekend, you know, there was a crane that collapsed and you know, in New York City. So we end up probably having a engineer come in and look at that crane and make sure that it was being operated properly, and they would make the determination as to whether or not this is just an accident or if this is something where we have a criminal negligence going on. Forensic audio. So when you see those videos that are played on the news where we're playing back the tape of a 911 phone call and the caller is on a cell phone and it's very hard to understand what the caller is saying because the cell phone quality is low and the recording quality is not the best, they can come in and reconstruct that sound and bring that person's voice out. They can also go in and add the subtitles so we can read what people are saying when you have folks with thick accents or other things. From time to time, we do have some things called voice stress analyzers, so we can evaluate voices on a tape. I'm not going to say whether or not they're good or bad. There's just some question about that lie detection in the voice stress analyzer and how truthful it is, but it's out there. Be aware of it. That's where I will leave it for this class. All right, our forensics computer data specialists. When we talk about computer crime later, you'll find that there are two steps to computer evidence. There is the collection of the device at the crime scene, and then there's the processing of the device at the crime lab. So these folks can come to our crime scenes and begin pre-processing the evidence, start looking at some of it live while the device is still on and powered up, or they will look at it strictly only in the lab setting. And it could be computers, cell phones, cameras, your smartphones, PDAs, which are personal digital assistants. They're kind of, you know, what we used to have before iPads. I should probably update the slide a little bit. Sorry about that. But some of our different, you know, smart devices out there. Toxicology. From time to time, we need to do drug testing when somebody is claiming they wouldn't normally have done this, except for the fact that they were, had their drink spiked by something. Well, let's get a urine sample and see if their drink was spiked by something. This can be in some of our rape investigations where we have victims who say, I would normally never have acted in this way, but somebody put something in my drink and I think I've been drugged. So we're looking at, drug testing. Human performance is something we don't get into in law enforcement, but when there's allegations of sports stars doping, that's human performance toxicology. And then something else that we deal with in law enforcement quite a bit is post-mortem, checking people's blood and urine after their death to find out how much drugs or alcohol are in their system, to find out if this drunk driving crash was caused by alcohol, to find out if this accident was caused by drugs, etc., etc., etc. Our firearms examiners, folks who will take a look at guns and can decide whether or not a bullet fired from a specific gun was actually fired from that gun or a different gun. The casings found at the crime scene, did they come from a suspect's gun or a different gun? We can even start tracking back our trajectories and find out, did the bullet come from this way or did it come from this way? Are we looking at this angle or this angle? How did these things come? And if we track back the trajectories, you can say that the shooter was standing right there, or the shooter was standing over here, or the shooter was standing over there, and start to kind of show how this event took place. Don't forget, from time to time, we will call in our federal agencies. We do have to understand which agencies do what. We don't have enough time in this recording to really outline what every agency does, but DEA, they deal with drugs. ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, right there in their name. FBI, they deal with a lot of different things, including terrorism, serial crimes. The FBI is, in charge of bank robberies. They deal with quite a few different things as it relates to interstate crime, RICO violations. Then we get into, say, like the Secret Service. The Secret Service does a lot more than protect the president. That's actually a small part of their job. Secret Service deals a lot with the counterfeit monies and, protecting our currency. We even have the Postal Inspection Service. So if you have people committing mail fraud and identity theft, you might call the post office and get in touch with the postal inspectors. There's a lot of federal agencies out there. When you start learning about them, you're amazed at how many are out there. There's so many ones that you've never heard of that are out there. So they will assist in a lot of our crime scenes. Very rarely do they take them over. Hazmat, when we're dealing with situations where we have chemical spills or we're dealing with, like, say, a meth lab, bring in the hazmat folks, let them deal with the scene. You don't want to touch any of that quote-unquote icky stuff. Fire and arson, if we've got a fire, the fire department has their fire investigators, or we will have special officers at our department trained in fire investigation. Keep in mind, too, even if you don't have a fire, you can call the fire department, and they have their big light poles that they can put up on the ends of their ladders and give us light at our outdoor crime scenes. Likewise, if we think we have accelerants at a fire, we've got our arson dogs. We bring those in. There's a couple of them here in the state of Wisconsin. We bring them in. They can sniff around and find where possibly an accelerant has been poured, and that gives us an idea of where to collect the evidence to prove the arson. Don't forget, our district attorney is also part of our crime scene team. So if you need a search warrant, if you are questioning whether or not you need to get subpoenas for records, call the DA. The DA will let you know what you need and will walk you through the steps of getting you those orders. All right, so in conclusion, there's a lot of folks who could be at our crime scenes. There's a lot of stuff that can be done within our crime scenes. We need to work together, and we need to do a good job. So if anybody has any questions, I'm always available for emails, phone calls. Stop in to the Public Safety Training Center not at the Appleton campus, but off of County Road BB out in the Greenville Township, and you can see me for my office hours. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week. Bye.